She was a CEO worth millions, feared in every boardroom. Yet one night, she slipped into the shadows to secretly follow a janitor, an exhausted single dad with nothing but a mop, a duffel bag, and secrets he thought no one saw. But what Eleanor Hayes discovered in those hidden hours wasn't just shocking. It would unravel lies, expose a buried tragedy, and change everything she believed about love, justice, and herself. The skyscraper had fallen silent, its glass walls reflecting a city still pulsing with life below. But inside, only the faint hum of fluorescent lights remained. Eleanor Hayes, the woman everyone knew as a flawless and untouchable CEO, stood by the tall window of her office. She should have been reviewing reports or calling her driver, yet her eyes were fixed on the janitor pushing his cart down the deserted hallway. Daniel Moore. She had seen him countless times before, his figure fading into the background like wallpaper. But lately, his routine had changed. He stayed longer, left later, and carried himself with a tension she couldn't ignore. That night, when he slipped into the back stairwell instead of heading toward the staff exit, something stirred in her chest, an impulse she had no name for. Against reason, she followed. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and bleach, each echo of his footsteps magnified in the hollow chamber. She descended a few steps behind, clutching her coat as though it could conceal the absurdity of her actions. What was she doing? A woman who had commanded boardrooms, humbled billionaires, was now trailing a janitor through shadows. Yet she couldn't stop. There was a gravity about him, a quiet determination, that reminded her of ghosts from her own past, the kind that whispered that some stories hide in the least expected places. Outside, the city's night air hit her like a slap, crisp, carrying the mingled scents of fried food from corner vendors and exhaust from late buses. Daniel moved quickly, head down, his duffel bag strapped tight. He wasn't going home, Eleanor realized. Curiosity and unease coiled together as she followed him through streets lit in fractured neon. He passed lively restaurants where laughter spilled onto sidewalks, but he never looked up, as if the world of joy was no longer his to claim. Then he entered a hospital. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Through the sterile brightness of the lobby, she watched him sign in with the ease of someone who had done it too often. He walked with purpose down a hallway lined with the faint scent of antiseptic. Eleanor trailed at a distance, heart pounding, until he slipped into a pediatric wing. She caught a glimpse through the glass. Daniel at the bedside of a small girl, brushing her hair back tenderly, whispering something that made her lips curve weakly into a smile. His daughter. The sight pierced Eleanor with unexpected force. She had assumed fatigue explained his late nights, but now she saw something else. An anchor he refused to let go of. When he left, Eleanor's feet moved before her mind could resist. She followed again, out of the hospital and deeper into the city until he reached a courthouse. The marble steps glowed faintly under street lamps, an austere fortress even at night. To her astonishment, Daniel didn't hesitate. He pushed open the heavy doors and disappeared inside. Eleanor slipped through as the security guard recognized him with a nod, not questioning his presence. Inside, the courthouse was eerie, its corridors echoing with silence. Daniel made his way to a records office, retrieving files with the precision of someone who knew exactly where to look. She caught sight of bold titles stamped across the folders. Custody petition, accident report. He tucked them into his bag with shaking hands, his jaw set like stone. Finally, near dawn, he returned to his apartment building, a weathered structure with rusted mailboxes and peeling paint. Eleanor paused across the street, hidden in shadows. Through a cracked window, she watched him lay the files across a small desk cluttered with books, binders, and sticky notes, scribbled with legal terms. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a father, a student of justice by necessity, a man fighting battles that no one saw. Daniel checked on his daughter once more before sitting down to read, his eyes burning with exhaustion but refusing to close. The room smelled faintly of detergent and dust, but there was warmth in the way the child's bracelet caught the lamplight. colorful beads spelling hope. Eleanor pressed a hand against her chest. She came here chasing suspicion, but what she had uncovered was more powerful. A story of devotion and defiance, unfolding in quiet desperation. And though she told herself she was only an observer, Eleanor knew something inside her had shifted, and she could not walk away unchanged. The night after her discovery, Eleanor could not sleep. Images of Daniel at his desk, his weary hands flipping through custody petitions and accident reports, invaded her mind. She was accustomed to figures and forecasts, decisions calculated with precision. But what she had seen was something raw and unmeasurable. It reminded her too much of her own father, his silent defeat in the face of a system that crushed him, and of her childhood spent wishing someone stronger had intervened. She had escaped that world by building an empire, but now she wondered if she had only built walls around her heart. Daniel's story unfolded to her in fragments over the following days. She began asking quiet questions around the company, listening for whispers. It didn't take long before pieces aligned. His wife, Claire, had died in what was called a tragic car accident, but rumors suggested negligence on the part of an insurance company that had refused proper coverage. Claire's wealthy parents had blamed Daniel, branding him incompetent, unfit to raise Emma. They filed for custody, confident their money and influence would tip the scales. Yet Daniel did not surrender. With no law degree, no allies, he studied legal books by night and worked as a janitor by day, building a defense from scraps of knowledge and unshakable love. Eleanor found herself haunted by the memory of Claire's name. It was linked to a corporate deal she vaguely recalled from years earlier, one involving a powerful insurance conglomerate that had once crossed her path in business negotiations. A chill spread through her. Was it coincidence? Or was there a deeper connection between Daniel's tragedy and the ruthless corporate world she herself inhabited? Meanwhile, Daniel continued his midnight rituals. After Emma's hospital visits, treatments for a respiratory condition that often left her weak, he returned home to pore over files. Eleanor saw him once through the cracked window, tracing lines in a deposition with his finger, his lips moving as if practicing arguments. At times he paused to look at a photograph of Claire, Emma perched on her hip, the edges frayed from constant handling. He touched it like a talisman, as though drawing courage from the love frozen in that image. Emma herself was a quiet, fragile presence, yet her spirit glowed in small ways. Eleanor noticed the drawings taped above her bed, stick figures of herself, her father, and a smiling woman with golden hair. "Mommy," scrawled in uneven letters, hovered above the figure. Next to it, Emma had drawn a balance scale, one side heavy with coins, the other with a heart. The heart outweighed the money. Eleanor stared at that picture longer than she cared to admit. It was as though the child had distilled the entire battle into crayons. Eleanor's inner conflict deepened. Part of her argued to keep her distance, to remain the untouchable CEO who did not entangle herself in the private lives of employees. Yet another part, the part still carrying the frightened girl she once was, screamed to intervene. She recalled standing in a courtroom decades ago, hearing strangers debate her custody as though she were a commodity. She remembered the smell of her mother's perfume masking desperation, her father's silence like a void, and the cold certainty that her fate would be decided by wealth, not love. That memory made her fists clench. She could not bear to see Emma relive it. Daniel's determination grew bolder. One night, Eleanor glimpsed him speaking softly into a recorder, preparing statements about how he provided for Emma. His words were simple yet seared with devotion. "She is my daughter. She knows my voice when she wakes from nightmares. She reaches for my hand when she crosses the street. No amount of money can replace that." Tears burned Eleanor's eyes, because in those words she heard the very plea her own father had failed to voice long ago. The deeper she observed, the clearer it became that Daniel's fight was not only about custody. The accident files hinted at something darker: inconsistencies in police reports, financial trails leading to companies Eleanor knew. Among them, was the name of an old rival corporation whose executives she had once negotiated against. The realization struck like lightning. Emma's mother might not have simply been a victim of fate, but of negligence buried under influence. By dawn, Eleanor understood that her role could no longer be passive. Daniel's struggle was not just a private war against grief and in-laws. It was a collision with forces much larger, forces she knew all too well. For him, the battle was about keeping his daughter. For her, it was about confronting the ghosts of her past and the corruption she had spent her career ignoring. Standing at her window, bracelet hope still vivid in her memory, Eleanor whispered to herself words she had not dared in years. Not this time. This child will not be abandoned. The courthouse on the morning of the custody hearing stood like a fortress, its stone steps cold beneath the early light. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the smell of polished wood and old paper mingling with the hum of whispered speculation. Daniel sat at the respondent's table, Emma's tiny bracelet in his pocket, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles blanched. He wore his only suit, pressed and patched, and although his heart pounded like a drum, his eyes never strayed from the door where Emma would soon walk in. Across the aisle, Claire's parents sat poised, their wealth and confidence draped over them like armor. Their attorney, sharp and merciless, shuffled documents with the precision of a predator ready to strike. The hearing began with the petitioners. The lawyer painted Daniel as unfit, his income insufficient, his home too meager, his nights consumed by janitorial labor. He described Emma as deserving a life of stability, one only her grandparents could provide. Each word chipped at Daniel's spirit, yet he sat still, breathing through the ache. He thought of Claire's laughter, of Emma's drawings on the wall, of the way she whispered "Daddy" when frightened. He told himself he was not fighting for dignity, but for love, the kind that endured beyond poverty. When it was his turn, Daniel rose. His voice was steady but raw, each syllable carrying nights of exhaustion and quiet devotion. He spoke of Emma's illness, the way he carried her to the hospital and read her stories until she slept. He spoke of her bracelet spelling hope, of how she slipped it onto his wrist when she feared he would give up. "I am not rich," he admitted, "but I am her father. I am the one she runs to when she wakes from nightmares, the one who knows her laugh and her fears. Love is not measured in dollars. It is measured in presence. And I am here, every day, every night." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the judge's pen paused. Then came the twist no one expected. The opposing attorney presented evidence linking Daniel to negligence the night of the accident, insinuating his carelessness had cost Claire her life. Daniel froze, grief crashing anew. He wanted to protest, but words failed him. It was then Eleanor rose from the gallery, her heels striking the floor with defiant rhythm. All eyes turned as the CEO strode forward. "Your Honor, I request permission to submit additional evidence." The judge hesitated, then nodded. Eleanor laid a folder on the bench. Inside were documents she had quietly gathered, exposing discrepancies in the accident reports and financial records tying Claire's family to the very insurance conglomerate that had denied her coverage. Her voice rang with authority, yet trembled with memory. "I know this world," she said. "I grew up in it. I watched money bend justice until children were torn from parents. But the truth matters. This man did not fail his wife. The system failed them both. And if you strip him of his daughter, you will repeat that injustice." The courtroom buzzed with shock. Claire's parents exchanged frantic whispers, their lawyer visibly shaken. Daniel stared at Eleanor in disbelief, his eyes wet with questions he could not voice. Emma, seated quietly near the guardian, reached instinctively for her teddy bear, as if sensing the tide turning. The judge reviewed the evidence with furrowed brows, then spoke with measured gravity. "Custody will remain with Mr. Daniel Moore. The court recognizes not only the sufficiency of his care, but the irreplaceable devotion he has demonstrated. This child belongs with her father." The gavel struck, final and absolute. Daniel collapsed into his chair, relief flooding through him like sunlight after storm clouds. Emma ran into his arms, clinging to him with fierce certainty. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered into her hair, "We did it, baby. We're together." Eleanor watched, her chest tight, her carefully constructed world of steel and profit cracking wide open. As they left the courthouse, Emma tugged at Eleanor's sleeve. With a shy smile, she slipped the bracelet from her own wrist and placed it into Eleanor's palm. "You helped my daddy. This is for you." Eleanor closed her fingers around the beads, the word hope warm against her skin. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. At last, she knelt to Emma's height and said softly, "Thank you. You've given me more than I ever gave you." Outside, the dawn spread across the sky in shades of rose and gold. Daniel walked down the steps holding Emma's hand. The weight of the world finally lifted. Eleanor lingered at the top, the bracelet glinting on her wrist, a reminder that love and justice could coexist, that redemption was possible even for those who had hidden behind power too long. For the first time in years, she let the morning sun touch her face and believed, truly, that hope could bloom again. In the end, what began as suspicion became revelation. A CEO who thought she had everything discovered that true strength lived in a father who had almost nothing but love. Daniel's quiet fight for Emma was not just about custody. It was proof that devotion, courage, and hope can defeat wealth, privilege, and even tragedy. And for Eleanor, it was a reminder that justice means nothing without compassion. This story isn't only about a single dad winning in court. It's about all of us remembering that love is the greatest power we can carry. If this touched your heart, consider subscribing, sharing the story with someone who needs hope today, or supporting us through Super Thanks. So together, we can keep telling stories that prove light always finds a way through the darkness.